Alright, what is up you guys, and welcome back to the Progressive Skills in English Level 2 coursebook. Before we hop right into Theme 3, I'd just like to say that I'm really sorry for the delay. Some stuff have been going on, but I'm back now, so you guys should expect more content. Anyway, so we have Theme 3, News and Media. Let's hop right in. So we have Exercise A, Activating Ideas. We're going to be looking at some of the illustrations here. We have some illustrations, right? And we're gonna basically, what does each illustration show? Well, just use your own imagination to think, what does each one mean or show? Well, for one, we'll probably say A here. I think one shows probably a man making an official announcement. I'm not sure which country that is, but it's a man making an official announcement. And for B, this looks like a very early newspaper. Looks like a newspaper, but a very old one, right? And for C, we have this looks like some sort of early printing from China. Hope I'm not mistaken on that one. We'll check our answers anyway later. So for D, this looks like, I think this is an early machine for printing, because look at the picture, look at the paper here. And for E, we have this, I think this is actually one of the very first newspapers. So yeah. And then we have F. This looks like it's some sort of early advertisement. And then we have G. This looks like people are listening to a story or something related to a story from a newspaper, right? And H, we have, this looks like print media, right, in the present day, so nowadays. Now let's go and check our answers, right? Here, have a listen.
Track 3.1.
Picture A. A Roman man is making an official announcement to the crowd. Picture B. This is a very early newspaper. Picture C. This is an example of early printing from China. Picture D. This is an early machine for printing. Picture E. This is one of the first newspapers in the world. Picture F. This is one of the very first newspaper advertisements. Picture G. The people are listening to a story from a newspaper because some of them cannot read. Picture H. This is a range of print media from the present day.
Alright, so now that we got that out of the way, these were the different illustrations. Now let's move on to Exercise B, Understanding the Organization of a Lecture. So here we have, you're going to listen to a lecture on the early history of the mass media, right? We have some notes here, right? And we're going to be listening to an introduction to the lecture itself, right? I want you guys to answer, what is the lecturer going to talk about in the lecture, and see if we have to correct any student notes here. Okay, so here, have a listen.
Track 3.2.
Today, I'm going to talk about the early history of the mass media for news. I'm not going to talk about the complete history today, just the early history. And I'm not going to talk about the mass media for entertainment, just the mass media for news. We'll talk about the mass media for entertainment another day. First, I'll talk about spoken news. Then I'll tell you about written news in ancient Rome and ancient China. Next, I'll describe the start of printing and the development of daily newspapers. Finally, I'll set you an assignment.
Alright, so based on what we just heard from the lecturer, we know that he's going to talk about mass media for news. So only for news, and he's not going to talk about entertainment, okay? So he's going to talk about mass media for news, and he's going to talk about the history of spoken news, written news, printing early newspapers, and we'll add one more. So 4 here, he's going to give us an assignment. Okay, so one more time, he's going to talk about mass media for news. That's it, no entertainment. And then he's going to talk about the history of spoken news, written news in ancient Rome and ancient China, printing in early newspapers, and then he's going to give the students an assignment. Okay, so that was exercise B. Now let's move on. What do we have here? Here we have understanding the key information, exercise C. We have listen to the rest of the lecture, and is each sentence true or false? Alright, so now we're going to be listening to the rest of the lecture. I hope you guys, get ready to take notes, because this is long. It's almost 5 minutes long, so take notes, right? And then we're going to see if each sentence is true or false, and then we're going to correct the false statements, okay? So be careful, because we're going to have to correct the false ones, and then we're going to write what is the assignment, okay? So here we go, guys. Get ready.
Track 3.3.
For many thousands of years in human history, there was no mass media for news because ancient people didn't have written language. Gradually, ancient people developed written language, but most people were not literate. They could not read or write their own language. People communicated news in speech. For example, in England, there were town criers. These people shouted the news in the streets. But news was not communicated to all the people in a particular area at the same time. For example, everybody in one town or city, because all communication was in speech. There was no method of transmitting speech to a large number of people. Transmission of speech to a mass audience started with the invention of the radio in the late 19th century. So, there was no written news for thousands of years. Then, around 60 BCE, the first written news appeared. It was called acta diurna, which means daily acts or events. It was not printed, it was handwritten. It appeared each day on message boards in the squares of ancient Rome. However, as I said, most people could not read. Therefore, this was not really mass media. Someone had to read the news to individuals or groups of people. At around the same time, there were daily reports in ancient China called Vowel. But these reports were for government officials. They were not for the general public. So, how did the mass media for news really start? In around 900 CE, the first real printing appeared. It was invented in China. There was one wooden block for each character. The printer could move these around to make text. However, the process was very slow, so printing was very expensive. Then, in 1446, a German, Guttenberg, invented the first printing press. This was really the start of the mass media for news. The printing machine produced text quickly and cheaply, so the printer could make hundreds or even thousands of copies and distribute them all over the town, the area, or even the country. In 1450, book distribution was very small. There were only a few thousand books in Europe. All of them were produced by hand. By 1500, there were more than 9 million books. The general public wanted to read the books, so they started to learn to read. Printing led to literacy in the general public, and literacy led to the first daily newspapers at the start of the 17th century. In 1477, a tiny event occurred. However, it is very important in the history of the mass media. An Englishman, William Caxton, produced the first book with advertisements. Why is this so important? because the mass media and advertising are very closely linked. Okay, we have heard that the mass media really began in the 15th century and newspapers in the 17th century. We have also seen that literacy for the general public also started around then. But we have also noted that almost from the first, there was a link between the mass media for news and advertising. What are the links today? That is your assignment. Think about the different kinds of mass media for news today. Just news for the moment. What is the link with advertising? Oh, by the way, I'm not just thinking about advertising products and services. I'm thinking about advertising ideas and opinions as well.
Alright, so I hope you guys got your notes because that was quite a long audio. Excuse me. Now let's hop into the sentences here. People did not get news of events in early history. Is it true or false, you guys? Well, we know that this is actually false, right? And the reason is that they actually got news in speech, right? So we'll say they got news in speech, okay? Then we have B, the first written news appeared in ancient Greece. This one's also false. It appeared in ancient Rome. So we'll say ancient Rome. Then we have C, the first printed text appeared in ancient China. This one's actually correct. Alright? Then we have Guttenberg invented the printing machine in 1464. Well, if you had notes down, you'd know that this is false. He wrote it in 1446, right? And not 64. Or invented, sorry, not wrote. Guttenberg's machine made printing easy but expensive. Wrong. Well, it was easy and it was cheap, right? So we'll say easy. Oops. We'll say easy and cheap. Okay? Then we have F. Printed books were not popular at first. This one's also false, right? In 15 years, 90 million books were produced, right? So we'll say in 50 years, we had 9 million books. Okay? Let me actually write a comma here. Alright, we have G. The first advertisements appeared in 1477. Well, no. This one's also false. The first advertisements appeared in 1447. Well, it was the first book with adverts. So we'll say the first book with adverts. Okay? Then we have H. There was a link between printing and literacy. This one's actually true. There was indeed a link between printing and literacy. Then we have I. The lecturer thinks the mass media is linked with advertising. That is true. The lecturer does think that mass media is linked with advertising. Then we have J. We can only advertise products and services in the mass media. This one is false. Let me write that in capital. We can actually advertise, right, ideas and opinions as well. And opinions too, right? So, yeah, now that we got all of these, we have A, false, they got news in speech. B, again, false, ancient Rome. C is true. D is F, correct one's 40 and 46. Then we have EF, which was easy and cheap. F was false. In 50 years, 90 million books. Oh, let me write an S here. Okay. Then we have G. The first advertisements appeared in 1447. or 1477. F, it was the first book with adverts, right? Then we have H, there was a link between printing and literacy. That's true. The lecturer thinks the mass media is linked with advertising. True as well. And we can only advertise products and services in the mass media, which was false. We can advertise ideas and opinions too. Okay? Now, question 3 is, what is the assignment? What was the assignment question, you guys? Well, if I remember correctly, the assignment question was, what is the link between the mass media for news and advertising? Let me write the A here. Oops. And advertising, right? So the assignment question again is, what is the link between the mass media for news and advertising? Okay, you guys? So that was exercise C. Now let's move on. Here we have the vocab box. Before we move on, we have advertise, advertisement, define, mass, medium/media, radio, transmission, transmit. Okay? Now let's go to exercise D here. Listen to some sentences and letter the words below in the correct order. Alright, so we're gonna listen to some sentences here, and when you hear these words, just write their order correctly. So here we go.
Track 3.4. A.
When did the mass media for news begin?
B.
I'm going to talk about the early history of the subject.
C.
At first, people could only communicate in speech.
D.
So communication of the news was still through speech.
E.
There was no method of transmitting speech over large distances.
F.
The first newspaper appeared in ancient Rome,
G.
but most of the general public couldn't read.
H.
The Guttenberg printing machine made the process much faster.
I.
Newspapers were very widely distributed.
J.
The ability to read is called literacy.
We got that right. So again, the order is media 1, right? Whereas number 2, history is number 2, communicate is number 3, right? Communication is number 4, transmitting is number 5, appeared is number 6, right? Public is number 7, process is number 8, distributed is number 9, and literacy is number 10. Right, you guys? So this was the first part. Now let's move on to the next page. Alright, you guys, so now let's move on to the next page. Here we have exercise A, reviewing keywords and phrases. Right, so we're going to be listening to some sentences, and we're going to take the words that we hear. So for each sentence we have 2 different words, so find, define, news, or new, and we'll just take the ones that we hear, right? So here we go.
Track 3.5.
1. I will define the word media. 2. I am going to talk about the news media. 3. Medium has 2 main meanings. 4. A medium is a way of communicating too. 5. The mass media gets to or reaches a large number of people. 6. People communicated in pairs or small groups, or even in large crowds. 7. In around 900 CE, the first printing appeared. 8. The actor Diana appeared on message boards. 9. However, most people could not read. 10. Therefore, this was not really mass media.
Right, so these were the words that we heard. So we have define, news, to, right, different meanings, reaches, even, around, boards, however, and therefore. Okay, so that was exercise A. Let's go to the vocab box before we move on. So we have appear, entertainment, event, history, link, literacy, news, and printed. Okay, now let's go to exercise B here. Let me actually read the pronunciation check. Right, so we have these are two diphthongs, or otherwise called as double vowels, right? And they end in that I sound, right? So that E and I sound, we have way, same, explain, and ancient, right? So that A sound, right? But for A and I, here we have that I sound. So time, kind, chine, as in China. You get the idea. So let's go to exercise B, identifying vowel sounds. So put the words below into two groups according to the underlined vowel sound, right? So we'll say radio is EI, right? Case, again. Explain, again, EI. Assignment, we have that I sound, so it'll go here. Kind, again. Why, again, that I sound. Way will be here. Make, here as well. Time, I sound. And define. Okay? So that was exercise B. Again, so radio, case, explain, way, make, right? And for that I sound, we have assignment, kind, why, time, and define. Okay, you guys? So now let's go to exercise C. Here we have identifying words from the stressed syllable. Right, so before we move on, here we have something called hearing-related words. So we can often make verbs into nouns by adding certain letters, right? So you'll often hear speakers use related verbs and nouns in the same section of a talk, right? So there are three main groups of words, and let's go over them right now. So we have one, sometimes it is easy to hear related words, right? Because they have the same stress and almost the exact same sounds. So for example, appear and appearance, right? The verb and the noun, right? But sometimes it is a little harder because the stress is not the same, right? So if I say advertise and advertisement, the stress is not the same, okay? And sometimes it is very difficult because one or even more of the sounds are not the same, right? So for example, the word transmit becomes transmission, right? A word like describe becomes description. So you can see it changes quite a bit, okay? So now that we know the three different types of words, let's go to exercise C here. Let me open this, right? So we're going to be listening to some sentences, right? And each sentence contains one word from each pair of the words below, right? And you're going to have to tick if whether you heard a noun or the verb in each case, okay? So one, we have celebrate, celebration, combine, combination, compete, competition, right? So listen closely and we'll tick the correct ones together. Here we go.
Track 3.6.
1. The festival is celebrated in August. 2. When you combine all the colours of the rainbow, white light appears. 3. The competition is won by the strongest man. 4. Man has always wanted to explore space. 5. It is very important to motivate people to do a good job. 6. At first, the Wright brothers made bicycles, but later they changed to the production of planes. 7. You must get a person who is qualified for a job. 8. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about the natural features of the country. After this description, I will tell you a little about the history. 9. Everyone in the town participates in the festival. 10. The careful preparations of the Wright brothers helped them to succeed.
Right, so that was the list of words. Here we have number 1, celebrate, combine, competition, explore, motivate, production, qualified, description, participate, and preparation, right? So this part right here is are the verbs, and these are nouns, okay? Now let's move on. We have exercise D, predicting related word forms. Let me actually open this here. So again, we're going to be listening to a sentence, right? And let's try and hear the important verb. Which noun do you expect the speaker to use later in the text? Say the noun out loud. Alright, so let me explain what we're going to be doing here. So you guys will be listening to different sentences, right? And there's an important verb that the speaker is going to say, right? So you got to be careful. And which noun in the correct order do you think or do you expect the speaker to use later in the text or the audio, right? So for application, I'm guessing the speaker is probably going to say applicant, right? He's probably, for attendance, he's going to say attend. So keep an eye out, or I should say, just try to hear the important verb in each sentence. Okay? So here we go.
Track 3.7.
1. In this talk, I'm going to tell you how to apply to university. 2. It is very important to organize your files logically. 3. You must attend every lecture. 4. During the experiment, we measured the distance for each container. 5. Marconi found a way to transmit speech over long distances. 6. First, I'm going to explain the rules. 7. You must choose the best place to advertise. 8. The country is situated in Northern Europe. 9. The selection panel decides the best candidate. 10. Extroverts sometimes behave in a rude way.
Right, so these were the nouns in correct order. So we have application, organization, attendance, measurement, then we have transmission, then explanation, advertisement, situation, decision, and behavior. Okay, so that was exercise D, you guys. Now let's actually skip this right here. You guys will know what it's about once we read skills check 2. So predicting content from linking words, right? So speakers often introduce the next piece of information in a talk. For example, if I say, mass media reaches a large number of people. In fact, and I keep going, these are the words that basically are called linking words. So linking words are words that give us basically next pieces of information. So if I say but or however, right, if you ever hear a speaker say but or however, it probably means that he's going to talk about an opposite point, right, or an opposite point of view, or on the contrary, right? All of these are called linking words. Okay, then we have and or in addition, right, probably means that the speaker is going to add more information, right? And if he says so is a result, we all know that, because is for reason, right? So when a speaker or when you're writing down things and you say because, it's probably because you're going to say a specific reason, right? But if I say in fact or actually, that means that I'm going to give other information but on the same topic or same subject, okay? So again, words or phrases that or linking words that can be used, and what what the information coming after them are but, however, right, which says opposite or point of view, right? And or in addition means you'll add more information. So is result. Because means you're going to add a reason, right? And in fact or actually just means you're going to add other information on the same subject. Okay? Now let's go to exercise F here, practicing a new skill. We're going to be listening to some extracts from a lecture, right? These are some of the extracts, and we're going to predict the next part of the linking word, right? So we're going to have the linking word itself, right? I hope you memorize the information here, because based on that is how we're going to predict the next part of the linking words. Okay? Here we go.
Track 3.8.
1. There are advertisements during most mass media news programs because the mass media companies do not make money from the news itself. 2. In fact, 1 minute of TV news could cost the company $20,000. 3. Most mass media news companies buy the pictures from other companies, but they add the sound. 4. They pay a person to talk over the pictures. In addition, they employ people to link the news items. 5. It is very expensive to produce news programs, so mass media news companies are very big.
Alright, and that, my friends, is how you predict the next part of the linking words, right? So one was the mass media companies do not make money from the news itself. And 2 was 1 minute of TV news could cost the company $20,000. Wow, that's an insane number. Excuse me. Then 3, they add the sound. 4, they employ people to link the news items, right? And 5, mass media news companies are very big. Okay? So that was exercise F, you guys. These are the next information that we talked about and used to predict the what comes after the linking words. Okay? Now let's move on to the next page. Right, you guys, so now let's move on to exercise G here. We have using linking words and phrases. We have complete these extracts from a lecture about mass media news. Right, a linking word or phrase from the box in each space, and you can also use the same word or phrase more than once. So let's open this and let's talk a little bit about linking words before we start. So, like I said, but and however are used when the next information is an opposite point or something that's on the contrary, right? And when we have and in addition, the next information is usually more information, okay? And for so basically the information coming after so is always a result, right? And because next information is reason, and in fact and actually means that the next information is going to be other information on the same subject. Okay? So let's start with number 1. At one time, there was no mass media news dash people couldn't read. So we'll say because, right? So because. And why did I say because? Because this is reason right here, right? I even said it while speaking right now. So at one point, there was no mass media news because people couldn't read. That's a reason right here. Okay? 2, there are many advantages dash I'm only going to talk about 3. We'll say but, right? And why did I use but? Because it's an opposite point, right? There are many advantages, but I'm only going to talk about 3. Okay? Number 3, we have mass media news reaches people very quickly dash there are reporters in every country. We'll say because there are reporters in every country, right? Because reason, remember, right? Dash, we have very fast communications nowadays. So we'll say, in addition, we'll say, let me write that in capital. In addition, we have very fast communications nowadays, right? So in addition means we'll add more information, which is this right here. So we have very fast communications nowadays, okay? Then we have number 4. It is very cheap to receive television and radio programs nowadays. And then we'll say so, right? So mass media news is very cheap. This is a result, right? So as a result, mass media news is very cheap, right? Then dash, the consumer does not pay for news directly at all. Advertising pays for the news. So in this case, we can say actually, right? Actually, the consumer does not pay for news directly at all. Advertising pays for the news. And actually here implies that this is just other information on the same subject, okay? Then we have 5. At one time, governments or people in public life could keep secrets. Dash, nowadays, mass media reporters find out secrets and broadcast them to the world. So we'll say, at one time, governments or people in public life could keep secrets, and then we'll say, however, right? Nowadays, mass media reporters find out secrets and broadcast them to the world, right? However here means opposite point, or to the contrary. So however, nowadays, mass media reporters find out secrets and broadcast them to the world. Now we have number 6. Nobody can keep a secret anymore. Dash, there are reporters everywhere, and there's Twitter and Facebook and so on. But dash, some secrets are good because people need privacy sometimes, right? So we'll say nobody can keep a secret anymore. We'll say because, right? Because reason. There are reporters everywhere, and there's Twitter and Facebook and so on. But we'll say in fact, right? So in fact, let me actually write that. Yep. In fact, some secrets are good because people need privacy sometimes, right? This is all extra information on the same subject, right? Then we have number 7. Some TV news channels are on 24 hours a day. Dash, they need news stories all the time. So we'll say so, right? So here implies that as a result, they need news stories all the time, okay? So number 8, mass media news is cheap for the consumer. Dash, it is expensive for the mass media company. So we'll say mass media news is cheap for the consumer, but it is expensive for the mass media company, right? Opposite point, all right? Then we have number 9. 1 minute of news can cost $20,000. Dash, the news company has to sell advertising. Here, this looks like a result, so we'll say so. So 1 minute of news can cost $20,000, so the news company has to sell advertising, okay? That was exercise G, you guys. Let's go over it one more time. So 1, at one time, there was no mass media news because people couldn't read, right? 2, there are many advantages, but I'm only going to talk about 3. Number 3, mass media news reaches people very quickly because there are reporters in every country. In addition, we have very fast communications nowadays. Number 4, it is very cheap to receive television and radio programs nowadays, so mass media news is very cheap. Actually, the consumer does not pay for news directly at all. Advertising pays for the news. Number 5, at one time, governments or people in public life could keep secrets. However, nowadays, mass media reporters find out secrets and broadcast them to the world. Number 6, nobody can keep a secret anymore because there are reporters everywhere, and there is Twitter and Facebook and so on. but in fact, some secrets are good because people need privacy sometimes. Number 7, some TV news channels are on 24 hours a day, so they need news stories all the time. Number 8, mass media news is cheap for the consumer, but it is expensive for the mass media company. Number 9, 1 minute of news can cost $20,000, so the news company has to sell advertising. Okay, so that was exercise G, you guys. Now let's move on. Here we have skills check 3, using very, a lot, to, and enough. So we can use very or a lot to say a large amount. Like, for example, if I say this television is very expensive, it costs a lot of money. Okay, so emphasis on very expensive, and it costs a lot of money. Okay, and we use to and enough to give an opinion about the amount, right? So now this turns into your opinion. This television is too much money. I haven't gotten enough money to buy it. Okay, this is just a simple note here, by the way, guys. So you say too much plus an uncountable noun, okay? Money, okay? And you use too many with a countable noun, like televisions, for example. It's the same as when to use much and many with uncountable and countable nouns, okay? So now let's go to exercise H here, giving opinions on amounts. Let's see what we have here. So we have read skills check 3. We already did that. Why does the speaker think the television is too much? Right. So based on his own personal opinion, why do you guys think that the television is too much? Well, it's pretty simple. It's because it's expensive, right? So we'll say it's too expensive. Okay? He hasn't got enough money, so that means that it's too expensive. Right? Then we have 2. Complete each comment below about television with too much / too many or not enough. Right? So we'll say there is dash news on TV. It's on 24 hours a day on about 30 channels. So we'll say there is too much news, because news is uncountable, you guys, okay? So there's too much news on TV. It's on 24 hours a day on about 30 channels, right? Then we have, there are dash films. I really love films, especially comedies. We'll say there are not enough films. I really love films, especially comedies, okay? Then we have, there are dash hours a day in the day to watch TV. I have dash work. So we'll say there are not enough hours in a day or in the day to watch TV. I have too much work. Okay? Much again because work is not countable. There are dash channels. I can get 200 on my system, and they are all rubbish. Okay, so we'll say there are too many channels. I can get 200 on my system, and they are all rubbish. Okay? Then we have there are dash adverts. There are at least 5 ad breaks every hour. Okay, so we'll say there are too many adverts, right? We used many here and many here because these are countable nouns, you guys, okay? There are too many adverts. There are at least 5 ad breaks every hour. Okay? Then we have, there's dash sport on TV. I hate football and tennis and golf. And I'm guessing he goes on and on. So we'll say there's too much sport on TV. I hate football and tennis and golf, and he goes on and on. And for the last one, we have, there are dash programs about the arts. I love music, painting, the theater, etc. So we'll say there are not enough programs about the arts. I love music, painting, the theater, etc. So these were all of the sentences below, right? So There's too much news on TV. It's on 24 hours a day on about 30 channels. There are not enough films. I really love films, especially comedies. There are not enough hours in the day to watch TV. I have too much work. There are too many channels. I can get 200 on my system and they are all rubbish. There are too many adverts. There are at least 5 ad breaks every hour. There's too much sport on TV. I hate football and tennis and golf, and on and on and on. There are not enough programs about the arts. I love music, painting, the theater, etc. Right? So that was exercise 8, you guys, giving opinions on amounts. And yeah, that was listening, you guys.